Hello, this is Abe Singh, Director of Finance and Operations with the Hawthorne School District. The following is our budget calendar. As you can see, this calendar was approved last fall as part of the budget approval process. The June 11th date is our budget overview discussion. Our preliminary budget is in the early stages, and it is our goal to present a finalized and refined budget at the public hearing on August 13th, 2018. The following slide represents our historical fund balance trend for the ed, O&M, transportation, and working cash funds. You can see from 2013 to 2017, we have had a negative trajectory with that trend. Our overall fund balance on June of 2017 was $40.2 million, of which $31.8 million was operations. Our estimated fund balance in June of 2018 will be $38.8 million, with a projected estimated operational fund balance of $30.6 million. You will also note from our audited financial reports that we have had a deficit in the previous 3 years. From 2015 to 2017, you will note the deficit amounts within our operations. The following slide represents our updated cash flow projections. You will note that in May of 2018, our cash flow projection amount was at $13.1 million. That is the low point within our fiscal year. That amount, if it dips below zero, then it would necessitate short-term borrowing. And therefore, this is an amount that needs to be monitored. If there were ever to be a delay in payments from the state or any deferment in revenue, then that would again necessitate short-term borrowing if we proceed with expending the entire cash reserve. You can see in fiscal year 2020, we are estimated to be at $1.2 million if we do expend $12 million for the Sullivan Center. The graph to the right illustrates the fund balance year over year, and again, it does not represent the cash flow reserve, but the red line does represent that amount. And you can see in May of 2018, the low point is $13.1 million. However, the June 30th amount, the fiscal year ending date of June 30th for our audited financials is projected to reflect $29.8 million. The following pie chart represents our source of funding. As you can see, 87% is local. That is typical for school districts throughout the Colorado counties. We are heavily dependent upon local property taxes as a source of revenue for our operations. This slide reviews the Consumer Price Index. CPI is what allows a school district to increase the previous tax year extension by that amount. So whatever was received from local property taxes, taxing districts are allowed to increase that amount by the equivalent of the Consumer Price Index. in addition to any new construction that were to occur within the taxing boundaries. You can see the 5-year trend is 1.4% and the 10-year trend is 1.8%. This model for revenue does work for school districts that are relatively stable in enrollment. However, for those districts that have quickly increasing enrollment that drives having to hire a disproportionate amount of teachers to accommodate those new students, the consumer price index doesn't really accommodate that increase in expenditure. And if new construction does accompany those new students, it does make things operationally solvent, but if there is no new construction and you have an increase in enrollment, then you go into deficit spending cycles as we've seen in the previous 3 years. The graphic to the right represents our projected 2018 consumer price index through the month of April. We're at 2.5%, which is an upward trend relative to 2017, which is a negative trend. The revenue that's been assumed for our 2018-19 budget is as follows. We know explicitly what our revenue will be from local taxes as it relates to a function of the consumer price index. They are both at 2.1% from 2016 as well as 2017. So the largest majority of our revenue can be known to a great degree, and we would also include factors to account for the new construction portion as well. State funding has been changed. It is now provided through the evidence-based funding model. We were provided calculations on April of 2018 from ISB as it relates to the adequacy of school districts. Our school district was noted to be 82% adequately funded, which is a tier 2. Essentially, we are $9.1 million under being 100% fully adequate as it relates to this model. In comparison to the high school district 128, they were noted at the highest tier as being 168% adequately funded, or in essence $28.2 million over as comparison. Now, of that $9.1 million, the evidence-based funding model is funded through new money, and the majority of that went to Tier 1. With Tier 2, we are basically provided $108,500 additional in evidence-based funding. We do need to consider that there was a loss in the corporate personal property replacement tax. There was a $90,000 loss from that, so there is in essence a net of $18,500. We are assuming all payments are received from the state within this model, and we are continuing to work to reconcile federal funding as it relates to the revenue within our budget. In analyzing our revenue per student operationally, that being the ed, O&M, transportation, working cash, revenue components, looking back to 2007 as far as where this district ranked amongst our peers within Lake County, you will see that we were in the top third approximately, right in the middle of districts. We were higher than Mundelein, Fremont, less than Lake Forest, as well as Lincolnshire. The average revenue per pupil being $11,200. At that time, we were at $10,575, approximately $700 less than the average at that time. Fast forwarding to 2017, as we look at our revenue per pupil, you will note that we are now in the bottom 25% approximately amongst our peers. The overall increase over those 10 years has been only 0.9%. to a great degree, our expenses have been much more than that. Our average peer comparisons generate 24.5% more revenue per pupil, or $2,800 per student, or $11.8 million total for their districts in comparison to our district. And this is a state that arrives when your revenue does not keep pace with the increasing enrollment that has been taking place within this district. Notwithstanding the increase in enrollment of 441 students from 2008 through 2017, and almost an entire school full of students have been absorbed by this district during that time frame, all the while having minimal increases in revenue. You can see in the following graph how we expend our funds per student. Being service-oriented, the majority, 3/4 of these expenses are in salaries and benefits. Purchase services representing $1,300 per student. Supplies and materials being the next largest at $832 per student. The following slide represents our historical expenses from 2012 through 2017. These are audited amounts. You can see for the most part the majority of the object codes are stable with the exception of salaries and benefits. I'll go into greater detail in the next slide. From 2012 through 2017, salaries have increased by 4.66% per year. Benefits have gone up 4%. The majority of this increase is due to additional full-time equivalent positions that have been hired. We have hired over 50 teachers over this time frame, and that amounts to roughly $3 million. So this is all inclusive, all salaries across the board for the district and the trend. You'll notice from 2012 we went from $31.2 million to 2017 being at $38.5 million in salaries and benefits combined, having tremendous increases in that area, primarily again due to increasing enrollment, having to hire teachers to maintain our programs as well as class ratios. And that is basically what has driven some of the deficit spending, the majority of the deficit spending that was highlighted in the previous slide. The following is a summary of assumptions made for expenditures for the 2018-19 fiscal year. The salaries and benefits that have been included in this preliminary budget reflect what was agreed to in the last tentative agreement with our union. We have assumed a decrease in curricular supplies to basically fall back to the 2017 level. Technology, we're going to maintain our middle school Chromebook leases. Instructional spending is up by $680,000, primarily due to increase in salaries and benefits. We continue to spend down the IMRF fund, shifting that levy funds to the Ed Fund. Transportation costs are up by $300,000, which is a common trend within the industry. There being a lack of drivers, the renewals have gone up significantly for many districts throughout the area. And with our renewal, we also saw that increase amounting to $300,000 for next year. Benefit costs are up by $290,000, primarily due to the increase in the PPO insurance. $275,000 has been identified for 2018 summer project work, with a potential additional proposed safety projects amounting to $125,000. We have also seen a number of workman comp claims throughout our district this past year, resulting in an increase of $56,000 for the 2018-19 fiscal year. The following slide illustrates our 2018-19 tentative budget. This is in an early preliminary phase. The green represents our revenue, orange expenses, and blue the resulting fund balances as a result of the revenue and expenses. You can note that we've identified each fund within its independent rows. We've identified what our 2018 budgets were, as well as the year-to-date through the month of May, as far as where we were at with our revenue. In finishing out the June month, we will see our second local payment from property taxes come through, which will get us to where we need to be as far as revenue for the 2017-18 budget. The 2019 tentative budget revenue has been calculated as well to reflect the 2.1% increase in CPI plus an amount for new construction. Expenditures are as noted by fund. The tentative net budget can be seen, and it showed that we had an educational fund deficit planned of $877,000 for this year. For next year, we are currently at a deficit of $1.8 million for the Ed Fund, a total deficit of $2 million. Again, we're at a preliminary phase. We're going to continue to refine our budgets to continue to develop some of the expenditures. There are a number of assumptions that are conservatively currently within the budget that we will fine-tune to minimize the overall deficit impact of our proposed budget. As an example, we currently have 358 full-time equivalent certified personnel. We believe that number will be 355 for next year. Therefore, we may not need to hold the 4 contingency positions that are currently within the budget. There are a number of cost-cutting saving initiatives within the Operations and Maintenance Fund, and those have not yet been finalized. However, they will be included with the next tentative budget presentation. We will now consider projections. The following illustrates our projected year-end balances going out until 2023. You can see our 5-year historical as well as our 5-year projection within this graph. You can see the overall negative trend with our fund balances decreasing over time. The 2018-19 expenditure of Sullivan is factored in this projection, and the negative trajectory continues downward. As you can see, this is our fund balance. This is not our cash reserve illustration. And you can note the continued deficit spending projections unless something is done to address some of the expenditures or considering additional new revenue streams. Both would have to be considered, starting with cost-cutting measures to identify Tier 1 type savings. Looking back at some of our historical numbers related to fund balance in the Ed, O&M, Transportation, and Working Cash funds, you will notice from 2013 to 2017 on the left, the decrease due to the deficit spending. Hypothetically, if we found $2 million per year in savings or revenue, or perhaps a combination of both, $1 million in each, the $2 additional million per year would have allowed, hypothetically, to allow the district to have even fund balances through that time period. And that's illustrated in the bar graph to the right. We now continue conversations into the EFMP and preliminary consideration of how we may be able to afford issuing some of these bonds. Considering our current updated adopted EFMP, if that were the option we would consider moving forward with, we may be best served considering a 5-phase approach to the implementation of these projects from 2019 through 2023. You will notice by building how we've identified each phase by level of urgency as well. We would have to inflate the cost for year 4 and 5 to reflect any increase in construction costs for those years, essentially going from a 3-year implementation to a 5-year implementation. We will next consider how this would affect our debt ceiling in the next slide. The following illustrates our debt ceiling. Our debt ceiling is essentially 6.9% of the EAV, and to be able to use 75% of our debt ceiling, you will see the number highlighted in green. So if you look at our debt ceiling minus our current outstanding debt, it would show the amount that would be available to be able to issue bonds to remain within our 75% usage of our debt limit. And you can clearly see in blue, by having a 5-year phased-in approach, we would be under the 75% mark through 2022. However, in 2023, we're just above. We do need to understand that this was a conservative projection, assuming EAV is flat. With an increase in EAV, we would be able to absorb that amount. Miss Elizabeth Hennessy from Raymond James has provided for us 2 options for bond issuances for the $53 million EFMP option that's being considered. There are 2 options. Option A being highlighted below, and you will see that the total proceeds from this would be $53.2 million. It's highlighted in yellow, the all-in true interest cost being 4.46%. And you will also notice the impact on varying values of homes to the right. It is represented from $200,000 to a $700,000 home, and what the impact would be over time. Again, in consideration of option A, the graphic below illustrates how that would look. The graph above represents our current debt service and how it's increasing currently as is through 2023 to $733, with a decrease in 2024 of $506, and then there would be a windfall in 2025 where that would fall out. Now, with the proposed referendum bond, you can see that if we simply included that on top of our existing debt structure, it would increase by a maximum amount of $166 in 2023, and then it would stabilize in 2025 at $341. And so it's simply stacking the current bonds on top of what is currently being proposed. Option B is a secondary alternative to how this bond issuance would be structured. The all-in interest cost would be 4.51%, total proceeds again generating $53.2 million. And we'll move on to the next slide where we can clearly see how this option is different than option A. With option B, we are restructuring the current outstanding referendum bonds, and you can see that the peak has been removed and spread forward to 2029. And the positive aspect of this option is that as it relates to the current outstanding bonds, we are maintaining our taxes on a typical $300,000 home to be net zero from where we are right now. And on a go-forward basis, it would be net zero, or it would decrease slightly through 2041. Clicking back to option A, you can see the difference where instead of spreading that payment out evenly, we are, with option A, stacking it on top of, incrementally on top of the current debt service. And so there are pluses and minuses to both alternatives. This is an early preliminary review of these two options, and indeed we will have Ms. Elizabeth Hennessy from Raymond James come in and formally present this information in great detail at a future board meeting. As it relates to the average debt payment over the life of the new bonds, you will see with option A, the table in the upper left-hand side, the $53.2 million, that representing option A. You can see the cost to varying home values. With option B, which is the $53.2 million with CAB's restructuring, you can see the debt payment over the life of the new bonds. Below that, you will see the first year net increase or decrease over the current payments for option A. And with option B, you can see it's net zero or negative $1 for home values at $400,000 and above. Now, knowing that the current operations within the school district has been deficit spending, and we need to go through great lengths to consider a tier 1 type cost-saving initiatives that do not affect instruction, where we can go through that full exercise and identify cost-saving measures within the district. We do need to understand that as a result of this proposed new construction, adding approximately 140,000 square feet of additions in addition to the Sullivan Center, that those operational costs are something that certainly probably will not be afforded within this district. As it stands right now, we've been faced with 3 years of deficit spending. Adding on square footage and increasing and adding an additional school within the district will only result in additional operational expenses. So if we were to identify just that portion of operational costs associated with this new construction, we have preliminarily come up with an amount of $1.3 million. So if there were to be a secondary tax rate question related to the operational component of the EFMP, the impact would be an increase to the limiting rate of 0.1%. You can see the calculations to your right. The EAV being $1.3 billion. Our current limiting rate in the 2017 tax levy year was 3.23%. As an example, if we increase that by 0.1%, then the resulting new funds would allow for $1.3 million. Now, the estimated impact to varying homes are shown in the bottom table, at the bottom center of this slide. So for a home valued at $200,000, the cost impact is $62. For a $300,000 home, the cost impact is $96. So in consideration of the bond issuance to construct being net zero with option B for the bonds, and having a secondary question to identify the operational costs associated with the EFMP, the overall net cost would be $96 for a home value of $300,000. Again, we will have Ms. Elizabeth Hennessy available at a future board meeting to go over this information in greater detail, and we look forward to hearing from folks as it relates to any questions or concerns they may have related to this presentation. Again, this is Abe Singh, Director of Finance and Operations with the Hawthorne School District. My phone number, if you have any questions, is 847-990-4221. My email address, if you would like to email me any questions at all, It is SINGHA@hawthorne73.org. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.